waking me up, so I hope I can match the how you've sold me. But you're absolutely right. We look at food and with the same challenges that you do, and how do you actually shift the entire value chain to be able to create a food system that is regeneratively designed, that is good not only for farmers' profit, for people, but for the planet as well. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit around the work that we did to develop the Big Food Redesign as a concept, and then finish off with where we're going next with the Big Food Redesign Challenge, which, as you said, is how we're getting supermarkets and big companies and small companies engaged in this journey. So bear with me whilst I try and get the tech right and share my screen. There we go. Right, the Big Food Redesign. So at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we concentrate on the transition to a circular economy. And one of the key principles of the circular economy is regenerating natural ecosystems. And food and the way that we grow and produce food really is one of the most powerful ways in which we can do that. And so back in 2021, we started to ask the question, what if food could be designed in a way that doesn't degrade nature, that builds natural capital, that is good for climate change, builds soil health and builds biodiversity, and asking questions like, what if your bowl of cereal did in fact enrich wildlife? What if your takeaway meal that you bought off your supermarket shelves did build soil health and led to cleaner water as a result of your purchase? And in 2021, we released the Big Food Redesign study. So I'm hoping people have had a chance to have a look at that. That's been on our website. But I'm going to go through it very quickly, just because I think it really adds the context for where we're coming from. And so the study was really showing how food brands and retailers in particular can apply circular design principles to food products to really help support and regenerate nature. So our research showed that food brands and supermarkets really do have significant power. At the moment, we know that their power doesn't necessarily have a positive effect on our landscapes, but also therefore they have the power to switch that so that it becomes positive. And our research showed that across the EU and the UK, the top 10 fast-moving consumer goods across a small range of commodities and retailers influence 40% of agricultural land. I mean, that's massive. So if you can get them to have a positive input on agricultural land, we are doing something fantastic for soil health, biodiversity, water, and air. We talk about food design, which is a bit of a strange concept, but essentially companies that manufacture our food, particularly the food that we all buy on our supermarket shelves, really is designed. Somebody makes a decision around, what ingredients go into it, where they source those ingredients, what it looks like, what it tastes like, ultimately how it's packaged and how it gets to us. And each one of those design decisions has an impact on what the product looks, tastes, and feels like and costs, but it also has an impact on the environment in which those ingredients are sourced from. And so really the Big Food Redesign is about creating a framework that helps organizations really rethink the ingredients that they use, how they're produced, and getting them to think about how they can provide a mechanism for farmers to be able to farm in line with nature. What supermarkets and retailers demand in terms of the ingredients that go into our products are what farmers will grow. And so we developed circular design for food as a framework, which is really about taking your product concept and then looking at 4 circular design opportunities in terms of ingredient selection and sourcing, which are diversification of ingredients, lower impact ingredients, upcycled ingredients, and all ingredients being regeneratively produced, and also thinking about packaging. So we've created this framework that companies can now use to help guide their thinking when they are designing and developing new products, ultimately putting what nature needs. And as you said, Philippe, nature needs different things in different contexts. So really getting to understand where your ingredients come from, who are the farmers that are farming them, and what does that relationship with farmers look like? But this framework helps to guide their thinking. So I'm just going to go through it in a little bit of detail. So let's start with diverse ingredients. Companies could use more both diverse plant and animal species and varieties. For example, there are over 4,500 varieties of potatoes out there, but we use I mean, I think I can name probably 6 different kinds of potatoes that I find in my supermarket, and all of them are white. If you go to Latin America, they are pink, purple, orange, filled with incredible nutrients and diversity. And so there is definitely a need for us to build diversity back into the ingredients that we're demanding for our products. We know nature needs diversity to thrive. Oh, sorry. The next one is thinking about upcycled ingredients. So we hear a lot about using food waste once it has gone beyond the farm gate. And that's great. There's lots of examples around how you can use waste products like waste bread to make beer and things like that. But our report really looks at the value add in thinking about how you can upcycle ingredients out of what is coming off the field and currently being either left on the field or going to compost or to biogas or something like that. How can we use that to create new ingredients? And the example that's on the screen is, can we upcycle sugar? So can we extract sucrose from on-farm waste? And in this example, we've used apple and pear juice, but all plant matter is made up of sucrose, so we can extract sucrose from it. And our modeling has shown that if we were able to do that, we could save, we could spare significant amounts of land from being planted from sugar beet, corn, or sugar cane, and they could therefore be used to do other things. Looking at lower impact, so the report talks a lot about the quick wins, and we hear a lot about the quick wins in moving from animal protein to plant protein. We are really clear that in the right regenerative farming systems, livestock play an absolutely crucial role at circulating nutrients and being able to build soil health and bring back biodiversity. But what we don't talk about a lot is the different plants actually have different levels of impact on the land. So the example here is really talking about legumes. So legumes have a fantastic quality of locking nitrogen in the soil. So if you think about how I always actually use my daughter's favorite cereal, which is Cheerios, a lovely wheat-based cereal that's available in supermarkets the world over. But what if we switched out 40% of that wheat flour for something like pea flour, enabling the farmers that are growing the wheat to potentially intercrop with peas? The company that's designing that cereal then buys all of that produce off the farmer. You're doubling the value, you're building in diversity, you're lowering the impact on the soil, but essentially you're kind of giving the same product. So really thinking about what is the impact of the ingredients that you are growing in the land having, and how could you maybe think about lower impact? I think another one of the things that I'm increasingly thinking about in terms of lowering impact is, are you sourcing ingredients from the right geography? So stop sourcing your avocados from the Peruvian desert. Look at where I'm from, South Africa, the east coast of South Africa. It's perfect climate for growing avocados. So again, thinking about when you are designing your food products and you're asking for ingredients, when your procurement team is going out to procure things, putting some caveats on that and saying, actually, you're only going to procure ingredients from geographies where they are very much suited to be grown, lowering the impact on those landscapes. And then finally, and I think kind of the all-encompassing piece is really this design opportunity, which is that we should be sourcing all of our ingredients from regenerative farming systems. And we define regenerative outcomes as healthy soils, clean air, clean water, and increased biodiversity. And I know there is a lot of talk out there around how you define regenerative agriculture. We don't like to define it because of the context-specific nature of it, but really thinking about what do those outcomes need to be in those context-specific areas. And we have been working very, very closely with the Sustainable Food Trust and the Global Farm Metric, which is, as Philippe said, it is a farmer-led, outcomes-based framework that looks at a range of different indicators, which together show that the farming system is actually regenerating soil, biodiversity, water, air, and the social constructs around that farming system. And I'll come more onto how we're using that system in a little bit. So we did this work, we did the research, we've designed this framework, and we then modeled how this framework would work on wheat, milk drinks, and potatoes. And we compared it against simply better sourcing ingredients. So by better sourcing, what we mean is we're going to just source the same stuff as we source now, but we're going to farm it better. And that's great, and it's brilliant, and everybody should be thinking about that. But what our modeling shows is when you start to think about adding in diverse ingredients or lower impacts or upcycled ingredients, we see significant improvement above better sourcing alone. So you can see from the graph that once we start to look at using the circular design for food framework, over and above just better sourcing, we're seeing huge increases in the reduction in biodiversity loss, in greenhouse gas emissions. And I think the one that really speaks to me is that farmer economics piece. Farmers will make more money. We will produce more food if we think about farming in its most holistic sense and how we can design food to be able to enable farmers to do what is right for the land. And so the way we describe it is we say that at the moment, we bend nature to produce food. So the way that we design our food products today is, it's all dependent on large-scale monocrop industrial farming, and we're bending our natural ecosystems to produce those ingredients. And we want to move, as you can see, as you move through this rather beautiful landscape image, that as we move to the right, we want to move to a place where we're designing our food products in line with nature and enabling nature to thrive. And so this is the kind of framing that we come from. So we've developed this framework and this concept called circular design for food, and really aiming to, I suppose, engage and inspire those that are in the research and development teams, in the innovation teams. There are very few people who call themselves food designers, but there are some out there, and engaging those people in a conversation around how to really fundamentally change how they think about food design, and also the kinds of people and organizations that they need to engage with along the value chain to really change the linear model that we have today. And in order to really make this come to life, there are lots of things that we could do, but we figured, why not get these organizations to compete with each other? And so at the end of May, we launched the Big Food Redesign Challenge, which really is aimed at catalyzing and inspiring retailers, fast-moving consumer goods, small to medium-sized enterprises and innovators to develop food products that utilize the circular design for food framework and that are designed for nature to thrive. So we had great launches in London. We had another one in Sao Paulo. We then took it to the World Circular Economy Forum stage, where Philippe joined me on stage. And so it's been a really fantastic journey, and it has landed incredibly well with the sector. We have a number of different supporters that we are working with, so I'm going to go through them all, but essentially we are working with a range of different players who are all looking to move in the same direction, which is how do we create a food system which is regenerative by design. So how is it going to work? So participation in the challenge is open to organizations big or small who create food products. It's a global challenge. And where the retail piece comes in, which is super exciting, is we already have from one leading UK retailer, Waitrose, so they have 350 stores across the UK. And we have a commitment from them that they will open up significant shelf space for successful products for 6 months once those products have been deemed successful. So that's from October 2024. We are currently talking to 2 retailers in Latin America, 2 in the US, another one in the UK, and some in Europe. And our idea is we would like to have between 5 and 6 retailers across a range of different geographies that are saying, we're going to jump on board with this as well. And I think it's been really interesting having that conversation with them, because they're all super keen, and they know that they need to move in this direction, but often don't really know how to start. And what we're seeing is the challenge is offering an open door. And I think what's really even more exciting than the open shelf space is that a number of these retailers are already signing up to put their own brand products through the challenge as participants. So we're getting them from both sides, which is really, really exciting. So we currently, to date, we've had 163 applications to participate. Not all of them will be accepted because they're not necessarily all food manufacturing organizations, but we're very close to 100 food manufacturing businesses, and each one could submit up to 5 different products. We're encouraging renovation of existing products. I've had a conversation with one very large global food company that is going to be reimagining one of our all-time favorite snacks that we find on a supermarket shelf, and that's as much as I will tell you about that today, but super excited about that. But we're also got, you know, a number of organizations who are thinking through how they can use the challenge to help them really rethink kind of design opportunities. So I'm going to finish off very quickly. So there's lots of benefits. So we're running a support program for anyone who is taking part. And for those who are the regenerative suppliers or ingredient suppliers, we have opened up access to HowGood's Lattice platform, because we're working with HowGood and the Global Farm Metric, and we have built, using their data, their suite of metrics, a holistic suite of metrics, which we will be measuring these products against. We're not going to certificate, but what we are doing is for the first time using a single set of data across a huge range of products, which I think is going to be really exciting and really, really informative. So very quickly, the timeline at the moment, we are in the design phase, so people are busy applying and they're joining our webinar series. We will have the prototype design ideas submitted by the end of October. We will score those, and successful products will be known and invited to go into production by January 2024. And those products will be on supermarket shelves by October 2024. And I will stop there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. At this point, I would love to have this a bit more engaging now, because I think Reniera and me, we've been speaking a lot and we have bombarded you with information. And I'm sure that there's questions from the audience. Can be on the Big Food Redesign. Also happy to answer any questions in regards to regenerative agriculture state. So whatever is on your mind, please feel free to shout out either in writing or in speaking.
Great.
And then happy to engage in a discussion here.
Yeah, Philippe, we have a couple of questions here on the Q&A already. And the first question is about the global farming metrics. And our questioner wants to know, what is the methodology of medition on which global farming metrics are based? I think is methodology maybe of measurements or something on which the global farming metrics are based. Who can answer that one?
So I'm not even going to remotely claim to be an expert in the global farm metric. I know the bits that we're using, and I'm not. But what I would say is that if you go onto their website, there is huge amounts of detail on how the framework has been developed and how it's being used. So I would just direct I don't know how to pronounce that name either, Zavon, to the global farm metric website.
Okay, great, thank you. And the question here from Brian: what plans are there to integrate with smaller retail outlets, more locally targeted supply chains rather than vertical alignment for large scale producers and retailers?
So one would hope, I mean, our hope is that over the next 18 months, we are in a position where we're getting products that are designed for nature to thrive on the supermarket shelves. If they're small supermarkets, fine. If they're large supermarkets, even better, just from a scale perspective. Once the products are on the shelf, we are also seeing this as a real opportunity to learn what works and what doesn't work in creating nature positive food products. And one of the things that we're going to be doing between October 2024 and May 2025 is taking all of those learnings and turning them into kind of tools and frameworks and support, and going back out to the sector to try and engage a much larger proportion of supermarkets and food companies in designing food for nature to thrive.
Great, thanks for that. Oh, the questions are coming in. Just a follow on from Brian there. He's asking about producers. What plans are there to integrate producers?
So as I said, we've been working with HowGood, which is like the world's biggest sort of food sustainability data platform. And I'm going to share my screen again in a second. What we've been doing is we have agreed with them that all suppliers, I'll show you, let me just quickly share my screen again, that suppliers who aren't necessarily manufacturing food products, but who could potentially supply ingredients. If you're a farmer, grower, or ingredient supplier, if you can see that on the page, you can then add your information into the supplier database, meaning that anybody taking part in the challenge is then able to find you as a supplier. Not only that, but you also have the ability to tick a box that says, actually, I'd like to be found beyond the challenge. So it's a really great opportunity for those who are, growing regenerative produce or upcycling ingredients to be able to get to find a market as well. So that we've certainly thought about it from that perspective.
Great. I think that answers your question, Damien, about whether farmers can apply to the challenge as well. Now, just going back up here, Cleana from Foundation Earth, since they're driving the same principles, including single database assessment, but consumers crave transparency and credibility. Absolutely. And it opens up better B2B engagement for product development. We would like to engage and see how Foundation Earth can support increased transparency via our harmonized credible system. Good point about consumers there craving credibility and transparency. What sort of, and this I think ties into the next question coming in from Lindsay about the communications campaign. Yeah. How are you going to target and how are you going to get that audience to buy these products?
So a number of things. One of the things that we hear from organizations is they are struggling to work out how to talk to consumers around produce that is designed to be more environmentally friendly, or is better for the climate, etc., etc. And actually, part of the power of what we see through this community coming together to go through this journey as a group is, can we find a single way of messaging? So it's no one organization that's going, I have a box of cereal and I want to talk differently about it, and I don't know how to do that. It's, how can we talk about this as a collective? Now, I don't know if anybody knows us as a foundation, but we have a hugely significant reach across the business network. So we have the world's biggest circular economy business network with over 2,000 of the world's biggest organizations in it. We don't necessarily focus on consumers, but we have huge broadcast channels. And one of the things that we will be doing is we are working with mainstream TV broadcast, and we will be using those channels to be able to share all of the learnings, all of the messagings, the products, etc., coming out of it. So we've got huge reach. The project is partly funded by the People's Postcode Lottery, and so there's a huge focus on how do we engage consumers. And we're currently in the process of designing up what, as well as being on retail shelves at the end of this, what does the big showcase and award ceremony look like? And we will likely open that up to the public to get the public in to engage with products that are different.
Great, thanks for that. You've an offer here for somebody to help spread the word in New Zealand and Australia. Thanks for that, Jennifer.
Amazing. Just on that, actually, yeah. just on that, we did a webinar in New Zealand with Circularity New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, and so Circularity New Zealand and the lady who runs that, Louise Nash, is very involved and is spreading the word as well. So it might be worth connecting in with her.
Great, great. Here's a comment in on the question from Marian. Thanks a lot for the good presentations. This lady tries to buy her food at Ecoplaza, where they sell quite a lot of products with the Demeter label, which I believe is an organic label, if I'm not mistaken. These products will be available for larger retailers, but they don't list them due to the big price difference. What will be the difference between the products coming from this project and labels such as Demeter? Isn't price still the biggest issue by far?
So price is going to continue to be an issue until such point as we've got enough scale and that the kind of financial transition for farmers has happened. And we can start to see prices come down. I liken it slightly to, renewable energy, where prices were ridiculously high. And then as it has started to scale and more people have engaged with renewables, we've started to see costs come down. We are not, through this challenge, trying to solve for the cost of living crisis. We know that. And we are being really open and honest about that. It is likely that at the moment, these products will have a higher price point. However, with the incentive being they have to go onto retail shelf, it's not Fortnum & Mason's, Harrods and Selfridges, it's Waitrose, which is, to be fair, a bit of a higher price point. But some of the other retailers that we're talking to, particularly in Latin America, are kind of standard retailers. And so when these companies are producing food, they are going to have to think about the saleability of those products.
Okay, Philippe, you want to come in there?
No, I would love to add a little bit there, because this is an argument I hear a lot, right? And it's just, we have studies already that show that regenerative agriculture production and farming is in the long run way more profitable than conventional organic, right? So one of the things that is happening there is that the input costs which you're using in conventional agriculture eat a lot of the profit margins of farmers. That goes down. That goes substantially down in regenerative agriculture production. So after the initial cost of transition of the first 2 or 3 years, the farm is actually having higher yields for less input costs, so more profit per farm. So that's the first part to get there. And then the second part is, and this is something that we slowly see shifting, is payment for ecosystem services, right? So in the end, through regenerative agriculture, you have a lot of side benefits, such as carbon sequestration, for which we already have payments through carbon credits. Then we have biodiversity increase, for which we are starting to slowly see a biodiversity market increasing. At the moment, it's still a lot more talk than payment, but we do have the hope that, especially with the nature restoration law, which is currently being discussed at the European Commission level, we will start laying the groundwork that governments will finally take initiative and reward biodiversity increase on farms. And through that, we could see finally payment for biodiversity on farms. My big dream would, of course, be that we have the common agricultural policy finally rewarding farmers for ecosystem services, at which point, again, regenerative agriculture produce could be cheaper than conventional or organic produce, just because the money income stream for farmers are more than just for yield, which they're getting paid for right now. And then on top of all of that, we also have several studies already out, and we are involved in 2 more at the moment, on nutrient density. So over the last 60 years, due to the way we have been farming, our food has lost a lot of the nutrients in it. The classic example is Origin Orange, which has right now 1/6 of the nutrients that it had 60 years ago. We know already that regenerative agriculture has 20 to 30% more nutrients than organic produce. So in the long run, when you're buying your food, you don't really care about the calories, you're caring about the nutrients that you're buying. So even if it would have to be more expensive, you would actually get more for your buck by getting more nutrient-dense food. But I do believe that we will actually see in the medium run that regenerative agriculture produce will be cheaper than organic or than conventional produce for all the before mentioned regions. Yeah. That's an argument which I hear way too much and which I'm very much against.
No, Philippe, I would agree with you. And certainly our modelling in the Big Food Redesign shows 100% that, you know, because farmer profitability is going up and how that then works through the system is going to be, you know, is going to be really important. So I would agree 100% with that.
Great. Well, listen, the questions are flying in here, and here's another one related to carbon credits. You might have answered this partly, Philippe, but I'm going to throw it back to you. Do carbon credits provide enough money to finance the 5 to 10 years to transition a farm from conventional to regenerative agriculture?
I think the opening sentence for almost any question in Regen Ag is, it is context specific, right? Okay. I think that's the very important thing here. And especially for the transition as well, especially if we speak about regenerative agriculture as a whole. So we have, for example, one situation which we're benefiting from right now, that is trees. Trees are, it's very relatively easy to get trees financed, essentially. So if, for example, farmers want to implement agroforestry, we can usually match them with one of our partners, Life Terrace, for example, one of them, where they can get trees for free, so the costs are relatively little. Same goes if you want to do holistic management, you have to set up a grazing plan, you have to get new fencing, but if you have the hectares available, the costs are also relatively little, and we can cover them quite quickly through carbon credits. Now, if we talk about crops and you have to get new machinery, then it's a whole different ballgame. So it always depends on the context of the farm, what the situation of the farm is right now, and what the costs involved are. So I can't give you an exact number, but I would definitely say that carbon credits alone are not the magic bullet, right? They are part of the solution, but they will never be the solution by themselves. They are something that we can use right now to aid farmers, but what we really need to start to see happening is government stepping in and paying farmers for ecosystem services. I think that's what needs to happen, because the way how we're giving out subsidies right now is just a shame, and it's not really leading to a healthier food system or a regenerative food system, not whatsoever. And that's where we would love to see action. This also comes down, for example, to soil water storage capacity. I think something that's now increasingly interesting. So healthy soil absorbs water from rain, and through that also prevents flooding. So, for example, in my hometown, Geilenkirchen in Western Germany, tiny town, you never heard of it, you will probably never hear of it again. But we had massive damages due to flooding, 3.3 billion euros in total 3 years ago in Germany and the Netherlands. These damages could have been avoided if we had healthy soils. So we would love to see here governments, maybe even insurance companies stepping in to say, hey, we pay farmers for storing water in the soil, which you can very easily measure with remote sensing by now. And in exchange of that, we have a reduced risk of flooding and we have a reduced risk of drought, as we have been experiencing in France, Spain, and Italy all over the place right now. So there are many different things that we should be paying for. We should not just be paying for carbon, but it is one of the things that we see payment already happening now. Hopefully soon it will be joined by other payments.
Great, thanks for that, Philippe. Yeah, you're completely right. And I know certainly from having been at an event in Brussels a couple of weeks ago where we were talking with the Commission, they are absolutely 110% behind you on this sort of transition to the regenerative agriculture and paying farmers appropriately, as you say, for ecosystem services. And really, we just have to come up with the, business models now to convince the farmers that this is the way to go. I want to give a shout out now, just give you guys a break for a minute, catch your breath. One of our colleagues from the Edible Cities Network is here. Sophia, you're very welcome. I know that Kieran and Sophia and some of the colleagues in the Edible Cities Network have been talking a lot, and the Edible Cities Network is an EU project exploring how urban food innovations can make cities around the world greener. And they'll be launching their new platform in September. Anyway, back to the questions. Wait till we see lots of positive comments about this being an absolutely incredible program. But here's another question for you. Does it worry you that all of these pilots and testing are being superseded by advances in markets and technologies that do not exist today?
I feel like I need a little bit more information to answer that question, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. How do you encourage people to use redesigned food? Well, again, I think you might have touched on that already in terms of the communications campaign. Wait till I scroll down here now. What percentage of consumers are willing to pay a premium to regenerative produced goods? Are they willing to pay a premium that supplier producers increase cost reduction? Some scenarios. Economic sustainability must be prioritized as well. Well, I think you've addressed that, Philippe. I think in terms of the payment for ecosystem services questions there. And I have a question, and I'm sorry now, I'm going to skip the queue and ask this, but I'm really curious to know about standards around regenerative agriculture and how can we stand over? We have standards for organic. So are there any standards out there for regenerative produced food and crops? Philippe?
Right now, there's a regenerative organic in the US, right? But in Europe, there's none. And I think the very important thing to say here is that these standards, they have to be outcome-based. So what we have to do is we have to measure what's going on in the farm, and then we have to essentially reward farmers based on that. So we see a massive issue with organic, and I think there was some questions on the organic as well. Organic never managed to get into the mainstream, right? We have a varying degree of 4 to 14%, I believe, organic produce. That is not enough. Like, if we get to 10% regenerative agriculture by 2030, I will be disappointed. Like, we need to push this forward in a large scale, and I do believe that in the future, we will be living in a food system where we'll be saying, you did what on your farms in terms of the conventional food system that we're operating in right now. And in order for this to make sense for farmers, again, we need to take a look at what indicators make sense in what context for the farm. We need to measure them, and we need to reward them for that. So one example that I can always give there is, for example, a lot of our farmers that are operating regeneratively lost their organic label because they started operating regeneratively. For example, something like a mobile chicken shed, which makes a lot of sense for the chicken, makes a lot of sense for the soil. It's basically you move your chickens on a daily basis. They go into the shed at night, so they're protected from foxes, etc. They go in by themselves. You close it, you open it up in the morning, you roll it over, and you let them pick on the next day. They have fresh insects, fresh food. The soil is regenerated. Everybody wins. Now, in the organic certification, as we have it right now, there's a tick box which the person basically goes through, and that says chicken need to have X amount of space at all times. Otherwise, you don't get the organic label. So while they're sleeping and they're actually comfortable in the thing, they don't have the space that is required for the organic certification, and they lose the certification. And that is not a system that we can have in terms of regenerative agriculture because of its context specificity. So we need to empower farmers to actually take the decision what makes most sense in their context. And then we need to just measure what's going on their farm. And this can range from indicators, which, for example, could be just as simple as an earthworm count, where you basically dig a hole at the same place 1 year apart, and you see how many earthworms are there. Just one example. It can also be through remote sensing, the soil water storage capacity, which is increasing. So what we're working right now is together with our farmers to develop a system that makes sense for farmers, and then we could potentially combine with the global farm metric that also makes sense for corporates. But I do believe that going forward, we will have to have some kind of verification of label that can then show to consumers that the product is really regenerative and that they really know what they're buying and what they're supporting. I would love to see this actually going in such a transparency level that we even make a profile of the farm and we just share what the data is. So we don't just say, you're verified, but we're saying, you're verified. This is the indicators that we're measuring. This was the results, and you can see the increase of the results. How amazing would that be if you actually have a profile of the farmers where you can see what's going on in the farm and you have the full transparency of what's happening. So that is what we will be pushing for with climate farmers, and hopefully there will be more others pushing with us in the same direction.
Isabel, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say you have a supporter here, Philippe from Ian, who says absolutely well said. Organic farming must stop trying to own regenerative. It should be all about measurable improvements in SOC, water holding, etc., etc. If it can only be managed if it can be measured, and absolutely, I think that whole measuring of impact and measuring of all the variables is hugely important. Listen, a lot of people here looking to, I think, support and collaborate. I see a comment in from Foundation Earth around a single harmonized assessment and certification scheme that would start to stimulate shifts in asset value in the value chain and bringing light to the value at farm level. They're happy to share their results. So again, we can collect your details, Trina, and maybe reach out to you through the Regenerative Agriculture community. And I think Brian put something up earlier on. It's gone off my screen now, but there was definitely some comment there about a link, some link to something from DEFRA in the UK, I think.
Did, Isabel, sorry, I have replied to Brian there, so he'll have communications there. I just see also that Dr. Candy Layton has her hand raised here. She might have a question that she'd like to come in with. If you bear with me on the technology for that for a minute, let's see if we can enable her to talk instead of being read out. Do that.
Maybe in the meantime, something that I was still wondering, Reniera, we never got a chance to talk. What will be the how will you assess the quality of basically the project proposals? So what will be the ways how you'll be measuring and saying this is a project that we want to support or this is a product that we don't want to see? What will be the indicators for that one? So
the indicators are fairly basic at a high level, but they are supported with a fairly robust, not fairly robust, a very robust set of quantitative data. So we wanted to take, so recognizing where we are in the system, if we said you had to prove that everything is from a regenerative farming system, we would get the sum total of probably 0 products, right? Because there's no way of proving it. There's no agreed global approach to it. So we're being quite pragmatic, because really what we want to do is set organizations off on this journey, and we want to get people to think differently. And so the scoring mechanism is kind of twofold. So the first is going to be your inspirational design story. How have you designed this product to be good for nature? And within that, you have to have the majority of your ingredients need to be regeneratively sourced. As well as that, you have to have included at least one other of the circular design for food opportunity. So you have to have either lower impact or diverse or upcycled, even better if you've got more than one. So, and then the third big piece is sorry, let me stop there for a second. So we're going to have this inspirational design story. So how have you worked with your ingredient suppliers and farmers to really understand what those landscapes need, and how have you built those new ingredients, different ingredients, into how you have designed your product? So the design story. We then are going to back that up with quantitative data. So you are going to have to use the How Good Lattice system, and you're going to have to put in some basic data about, the ingredients. You have to fill in supplier questionnaires, so you have to work with your suppliers to understand their farming, where they're sourcing their ingredients from, for the farmers if they're farmers. And for those that really want to shine and be like the top scoring products, you are going to be working with your farmers to enter a smaller version of the global farm metric data. And so we're building up a holistic picture of the story, the inspirational story, and then the data to support that. And then just the final piece to say is that the packaging forms part of it as well. Now, we're not saying that you have to be fully circular in your packaging, because that's almost impossible, because fully circular is no packaging, and we don't yet know what the route to market is going to look like. And so it has to have a circular story. So are you definitely not using any of the small flexible plastics that are non-recyclable? How are you thinking about the materials that you're using? So it's a combination of high quality design storytelling. What is that inspiration? Backed up by quantitative data using the Hauget lattice system and the global farm metric, and how it is packaged.
I'll just unmute Dr. Layton here for a second. Dr. Candy Layton, if you'd like to go ahead, you should be unmuted now.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I had to activate it myself as well. So thank you ever so much for the presentation. It's been absolutely brilliant, so inspirational, and yeah, I'm just really so excited about it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I work with cities, but I'm just so inspired by regenerative agriculture, and just, I mean, I work with cities because most people live in cities, not because I love cities. I don't. But fundamentally, the problems of the world are heat, and if we don't sort out soils in cities, we're left with the heat in the world. So is anything being done in terms of soils in cities and producing food locally in cities? Because obviously transportation of food around the world is a big part of the climate problem.
I mean, I'm happy to share some thoughts on that. So from about 2019 to 2021, the work that we were doing at the foundation was really about a circular economy for food in cities. And we established projects with London, Sao Paulo, New York, and then about 15 to 20 smaller cities around the world, really looking at what does a circular economy for food look like. And that really included everything from how do you deal with the organic waste, how do you deal with food as a material flow through the city, but also looked at the peri-urban farming area and how cities can access regeneratively produced food for their citizens. There are lots and lots of examples of cities that are doing some really great stuff in increasing the amount of urban food production. And so whilst it's not a focus of the project that we're working on at the moment, I know that there is a lot of work that is currently going on there. Like London is sort of really leading the way, Sao Paulo really leads the way, and both of those cities are doing some fantastic work in thinking through food, and particularly like regenerative food production from their peri-urban areas.
And I mean, to add to that one, I think one very exciting development that we're seeing due to the work of Kiss the Ground and others right now, there is more and more young people, and I think the pandemic also helped with that one, that are getting excited about farming again, right? And especially about regenerative agriculture. And that brings us to another issue that we're seeing, which is access to land, right? The property and the land prices have been developing so much over the last few years that, for example, in the Netherlands, where I am right now, 1 hectare of land is 80,000 euros. Now, try to set up a farming operation with holistic animal management, some nice tropic agriculture in there, and you're speaking about 50, 100, 150 hectares of land, which nobody can afford. But what people can afford is usually 0.1 hectare, 0.2 hectares, maybe 1 hectare. And we see a lot of market gardening popping up at the moment. And I think that's a very exciting development, which is young people close to cities. Here in Amsterdam, where I am right now, for example, there's an entire area on the west of Amsterdam, which has been dedicated by the city to give to young people who want to set up market gardens like the Staatsraum de Boer, which is where I was getting my vegetables last summer when I was here. And I think that is one way how many people can get involved when they want to start instead of buying in supermarkets, unless they're, of course, part of the Big Food Redesign, to start buying their vegetables from farmers who are doing CSA. So this is community supported agriculture, where you basically shift the risk from the farmer to everybody who's participating, and you buy a share of the harvest of the farmer, which is amazing for the well-being of the farmer, because he's not dependent on if there's a hailstorm, if something happens out of his context, everybody shares the risk. The farmer basically calculates what are the costs of the farm, including a fair salary cost. He shares it, and then people buy a share. So for example, 100 people buy a 1% share of the harvest, and then every week they get a harvest box of the food that is grown. And for me, it has been amazing, because there was a lot of things that I've never tasted before, which were part of the box with Andre and his team were growing here in Amsterdam. And I think that is something and a very interesting movement that I'm seeing, that these CSAs and these market gardens are popping up and are a great way of feeding cities in a more direct way and establishing a relationship again between farmers and people who are buying their produce, which is this part that has been lost.
Thanks, Philippe. And just to finish up there on Candy's question, I think in the chat, I've mentioned the Edible Cities Network. So be sure to check out that platform, another great platform for urban farming and food design. So we are just coming up on time. Philippe and Reniera, I'll give you a little chance if there's anything else you'd like to close on before we wrap up, and thank you everybody for joining us. But Philippe and Reniera, anything you'd like to add before we finish?
Shall I go? I suppose I wanted to say this. I mean, we've launched this challenge, and our report is really aimed at those companies that manufacture food. And I do recognize that, you know, Philippe, we should be supporting smallholder farmers. And I also get my veg box from the local farm down the road. And the challenge in the work that we're doing is not to say that that's not important at all. What we'd like to do is, you know, get to a stage where it doesn't matter whether you are buying your vegetable box from the market garden in the city, or whether you are buying your vegetables, your cereal, your pasta, your takeaway meals off the shelves of Tesco, Carrefour, whichever supermarket you're going to. We want to get to a point where there are no bad decisions, where every ingredient that has gone into every single product we find on our shelves and in our cupboards and that we cook with, etc., has been grown in a system that is in harmony with nature and builds soil health, builds back biodiversity, gives clean air and gives clean water, and is great for farmers as well. So I think I just wanted to make that clear, because you just said just now, Philippe, you know, like, oh, not if you're in the Big Food Redesign Challenge. It's a catalyst and it's an entry point. And you know, we recognize that, you know, wouldn't it be lovely if we all had the time to be able to shop in the farmers markets and to be able to buy fresh ingredients and cook from scratch? But, you know, like, I have a full-time job, I have 3 children. I love cooking, but it's not a reality of 21st century living. And so we need the entire food system to really embrace this idea of diversity, lower impact, regeneratively sourced, so that I say it like this. I have a little love for things like Snickers, right? Like my best chocolate bar ever. And whilst it might not be the healthiest choice for me, I would love to know that when I buy that Snickers, the planet got a little bit better, even if my waistline didn't.
I think that's an amazing tagline. I don't think I have anything to add after that one. I want to live in the world that Reniera just described. And thank you all for joining.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Philippe, and thank you, Reniera. That's been a fantastic insight. And yeah, I think we'd all like to live in that world where the world got better, even if our waistlines didn't. What a line. Look, thank you to everybody for joining from the Connecting Nature Enterprise platform. It's been a pleasure. Do check out the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website for more on the Big Food Redesign. We will have another webinar this time next week. This time we're joined by our regenerative forestry community and ecosystem restoration. We'll be looking at a rewilding project in the Africa Highlands and private investment projects in Ireland for regenerative forestry. So do join us if that is your bag. We look forward to seeing you all, and thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody.
Amazing. Have a beautiful afternoon. Ciao.
Thank you, guys. Excellent. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.